5 years ago, to make ends meet, I took a job as an overnight janitor at a library at a huge state university. If you're like most people, it might not even occur to you that there is a third shift janitor at a library. But hey, toilets get clogged at 2 in the a.m. too, and some grad students sure as shit ain't gonna unclog it. I took the job because I figured it would be easy, and because I figured most nights I could probably show up stoned, and I was right. For the first couple of weeks, not much happened at all, and that was just how I liked it. There was a night supervisor, some guy with a master's degree in library science, and a bad drinking problem who was there 5 nights a week. His name was Pete, and I started calling him Easy Pete because I thought it was pretty funny. He didn't like it much. More like Prickly Pete, I guess. He wore a lot of threadbare sweater vests and carried pins in his shirt pocket, and kept a bottle of rye in his desk in his office, and we mostly got along pretty well. There was also a revolving group of grad students who were Easy Pete's assistants, and some of them were chill, and some of them were dicks. They don't really factor into this story much. I got stoned with one of them, this chick named Allison, and she sucked me off in the second-story stacks in front of a bunch of Jane Austen novels. That doesn't have much to do with the story either, but it's a pretty nice memory. The library was old and kind of run down, and one of the things I had to do was walk up and down all the levels once every couple of hours, because I was also the night watchman. Mostly I was just supposed to make sure nobody was getting stoned or getting sucked off in front of Jane Austen novels. So every night I'm up and down, and up and down the stairs, which is okay because I'm in pretty good shape, and I don't mind stretching my legs. The stairwells aren't very well lit, and the stairs creak like I might go mad sometimes. So it got a little spooky, but I'm not one of those guys who goes around pissing his pants every time I hear something go bump. There was something about the basement, though, that did give me both the heebies and the jeebies. It was poorly lit and always much colder than the rest of the library. And I heard so many creaks and bumps down there that I just couldn't quite explain. There was also a kind of ambient tapping that I could always hear, like just beneath all the other noises. Something faint but persistent. I worked as an unlicensed nurse's aide once at a shady nursing home, and I remember an old man who was dying of pneumonia I had to take care of. This noise was like that man's cough. Weak, faint, but sure as fuck not going away. There was a night in December. I had been outside behind the library getting stoned out in a thick, heavy snowfall. It was one of those nights where the sky stays so gray that it seems just as light out at 3 in the morning as it was at 3 in the afternoon. Easy Pete and I had also sneaked a couple of belts of his rye earlier in the shift, so I was feeling pretty courageous when I went back in to do my rounds. When I got down to the basement, I decided to poke around and try to figure out where that tap was coming from. There were no messes to clean up anywhere, and the students working were both total dickheads, so I figured I'd take my time. I've never had good, echolocative abilities? I'd make a shitty bat, is what I'm trying to say. So it took me a long time, even concentrating hard and not being afraid to poke around, to figure out where the sound was coming from. There was an old wooden door to what must have been a conference room that had been turned into a storeroom. There were no sign-up sheets outside of it, and the window was covered in black poster paper. No attention had been paid to making it look nice or inviting. In fact, the room cried out, "Fuck you, keep walking, pal." I sometimes wish I had. Sometimes, I'm glad I didn't. The tap was definitely coming from the other side of the door. Only now it sounded more like, tap bzz, bzz, tap bzz, bzz. Like fingers rapping on a window pane and then a chainsaw off in the distance. It was a sound I could almost place. Something faintly remembered. I sighed. I remember I sighed. I sighed and thought, fuck it, dude. Probably like a generator or something like that. Some mechanical shit. Just something mundane. I was already feeling disappointed when I stuck my master key in the lock and started to pop the door. My buzz was fading. It was going to be a pain in the ass getting home in the snow. I had a shitty job, no girlfriend, and I was going to have to buy some more weed soon. And the big mystery I'd been looking forward to a few minutes ago was just going to be some bullshit. I popped the door. I flipped a light switch. The fuck? The noise was a dot matrix printer. Shit, I hadn't heard one of those since I printed off my last paper for my last junior college course years ago. It was 2010. I was in a well-funded, if run-down library in a huge state school, and there was a dot matrix printer that apparently ran continuously in a locked room in a spooky basement. The fucking fuck? I walked over and looked at what was being printed. It was a sentence. A single sentence. 4.5 lines long. I read it and thought it was perfect. The perfect sentence. I had no context, didn't know who any of the characters mentioned were, didn't know what all the words meant, but that sentence though, almost perfect. The printer kept running. The next thing it spat out was almost exactly the same sentence, but it was a little better this time. I don't know how it got better, but it did. Almost the same sentence printed again. It was so beautiful, I cried. I stood there in the room in the basement and bawled and bawled. It was so beautiful. I've never been a reader, but I remember a line from a poem this girl from an emo band I dated years ago had read to me once by some dead German. Something about how the sublime is that which only barely disdains to annihilate us. I got it. As I read the almost perfect sentence, I got it. Page after page of the sentence, tweaked slightly each time, printed out. I wept and wept. I was breathless, waiting for the dot matrix printer to slowly print each new iteration of the almost perfect sentence. It crept along at such a tortuous pace, like a man with a broken back crawling across a floor. But I stood and waited and read and wept. I had no idea how much time had passed when I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Pete, and he was literally dragging me away. Let's go to my office, have a word. Pete told me there had been a student back in the 80s, a real wild-eyed kid with messy hair and the demeanor of a panther in a cage. He prowled the library day and night. He paced, he read, but mostly he wrote. He filled up legal pad after legal pad with his writing. People were fascinated by him. People were scared of him. Pete hadn't known him personally. He had been told all of this by the librarian who was there on the night shift before Pete. He had been told all of this because he'd stumbled on the printer too. He'd also been told this. The kid had some kind of strange sexual charisma, like some magnetic lunatic out of a Russian novel come to life. The librarian, an old maid who didn't seem like she'd had an impure thought since the Kennedy administration, had confided in Pete. Well, sometimes we would get overwhelmed. We would, go someplace and touch ourselves during work hours. The kid was a saint. He was a demon. He had sold his soul. He was a genius. He was flunking out. He was inventing a new kind of physics. He was writing the great American novel. Rumors swirled. One night, they found him dead, sitting at a desk in the basement. The night janitor had found the body at 3 a.m. No signs of foul play. No signs of drug abuse or suicide. The coroner ruled it death by natural causes. A 19-year-old kid, dead of natural causes, died while scribbling something in his pad. The pads? You guessed it. Nothing but one sentence being revised over and over. A nearly perfect sentence. A sentence so good, people who read it broke down in tears. A professor in the English department wanted to have the single sentence published somehow, somewhere. Call it a prose poem. Send it to the New Yorker, he said. The kid's family had other ideas. The family lawyers demanded in writing that all the legal pads be handed over to them immediately. As far as anyone knows, they're in a storage locker somewhere or locked in a closet at the family's summer place. It was a few months later that the dot matrix printer in the library basement started printing the sentence, over and over. Changed slightly each time, improved, beauty on beauty on beauty. No one knew what to do about it. The university chancellor was afraid of legal action from the family who, in God's name, owned the rights to it. It was an interesting question. Pete didn't know the details, but he knew that a committee had convened to discuss the issue. In the meantime, it was thought wise to move the printer into a room and lock the door. And so they had. Pete didn't know what the committee decided. Given the pace of academic committees, it's possible they're still meeting. All I know for sure, Pete said, is that your life is never going to be the same. I'm still in the same job. I'm a pretty okay night shift janitor. Easy Pete and I get along just fine these days. I let him smoke some of my weed. He lets me sip some of his rye. We take turns, exactly 1 hour per shift for each of us, basking in the maddening brilliance of the endlessly rewritten sentence. At the end of the hour, we come in and drag the other out. Otherwise, we'd never leave. We just stand there reading the sentence, waiting for the next iteration. Sometimes I have a terrible thought. I want to go somewhere public and crowded, somewhere full of oblivious people living their oblivious lives. A Pinkberry, maybe, or a big store at the mall. I want to write that sentence and watch what happens. I think shit would hit the fan. Now that I have that urge, I feel like I've also become sublime. The sublime is that which serenely disdains to destroy you.